A rehearsal room, bare bulb swinging. A folding chair still warm from a body that isn't there anymore. Somewhere down the hall, a reel-to-reel keeps spinning a voice nobody wants to admit they miss. They told him to leave. They meant it. They had reasons. Good ones, they said at the time.
Don't be late, 'cause we ain't got time to chat.
And for a while, the band survived without him. Maybe even thrived. But there's a silence a lead voice leaves behind that no replacement can fill, no matter how good the audition tape sounds. This is the story of the soul and funk bands who fired their brightest star, and years later, humbled, broke, or just plain haunted, went back and begged.
You know, I'm a man now, baby, a grown man.
Subscribe now.
Taught me to hold on to my love.
Because tonight's number one isn't a firing. It's a wound that took a decade to close, standing right beside the story of a wound that never closed at all. The countdown begins now. Number 10. The Chi Lights, Oh Girl.
I'd be in trouble if you left.
Chicago, mid-decade. A record executive's office, cigarette smoke curling under fluorescent light. A single line on a sales report circled in red ink. The Chi Lights had one of the most identifiable falsettos in soul music. A voice that turned Oh Girl into the kind of song that could stop a room cold. Eugene Record didn't just sing it, he wrote it, produced it, shaped the entire emotional architecture around it, which made it all the more shocking when, in the mid-70s, at the peak of his creative power, he simply walked. He wanted a solo career. He believed, like so many gifted lead singers before and after him, that the group's success was really his success wearing a costume. It's one of the oldest illusions in the music business, and it has broken more bands than any record label ever could. The solo records didn't catch fire the way he expected. Meanwhile, the group he left behind limped forward without the songwriter who'd given them their identity, releasing music that sounded like an echo of something that used to be whole. Neither side was thriving. Both sides, quietly, were bleeding. It took years of separate struggle before Record swallowed the thing every gifted person hates swallowing most. The admission that maybe he needed the very people he thought he'd outgrown. When he finally returned to the Chi Lights, it wasn't framed as a triumphant reunion. It was framed as a correction. A mistake, acknowledged, if never quite apologized for out loud. Eugene Record's solo catalog remains some of his most technically accomplished work, and almost none of it charted. The industry didn't want him as a solo artist. It wanted him exactly where he'd been all along, singing harmony with the men he thought he'd left behind. Number 9. Royce. Love Don't Live Here Anymore.
Love don't live here anymore.
Los Angeles, late 70s. A soundstage after hours, disco lights still spinning over an empty dance floor. The ghost of Love Don't Live Here Anymore, still hanging in the air.
Love don't live here.
Royce gave the world one of the most heartbreak-soaked ballads of the disco era, carried by a voice that could turn celebration into confession in the space of a single verse. Gwen Dickey wasn't just a singer in Royce. For millions of listeners, she was Royce. The name and the voice fused so completely that most fans never learned there was a difference. That fusion became the problem. As contract disputes and business disagreements mounted, the relationship between Dickie and the band's management curdled. She left, and the group tried to continue. Replacement singers came and went, each one measured against a voice they could never quite replicate. What followed was a strange, drawn-out tug of war, not just over money, but over identity itself. Who owned the name Royce when the voice everyone associated with it was standing outside the building? For years, the answer stayed unresolved, both sides publicly insisting they didn't need the other, both sides privately watching ticket sales tell a different story. Reunions came in fragments, a one-off show here, a joint credit there. Never quite the full, clean reconciliation fans wanted, but enough to prove neither side had ever really let go. For years, multiple versions of Royce toured simultaneously under separate licensing agreements, meaning fans in different cities could pay for the same band name and hear completely different singers standing where Gwen Dickie once stood. Number 8. Kool and the Gang, Celebration. Atlanta, a stadium tunnel, 1988. A tour manager's clipboard, half the dates crossed out, ticket sales sliding down a page nobody wants to hand to the label. Kool and the Gang had already lived one entire lifetime as a group before J.T. Taylor ever joined them. A hard funk instrumental outfit that reinvented itself into a smooth, radio-dominating soul machine the moment his voice slid over their horns. For nearly a decade, Taylor was the sound America associated with Celebration itself, giving the group the anthem that soundtracked a decade of weddings and graduations. And then, amid growing tension over money, direction, and who deserved credit for the empire they'd built together, Taylor was pushed out. The group brought in replacements. The instruments were the same, the horns still hit, but something essential was gone, and audiences noticed immediately. Album sales without Taylor told the story in numbers even the most stubborn executive couldn't argue with. The funk band that had once soundtracked a decade of American joy was suddenly playing to rooms that felt half-lit. It took years of diminishing returns before pride gave way to pragmatism. When Taylor returned in the 90s for a reunion tour, the band didn't call it forgiveness, they called it business. But anyone who watched him step back under those lights knew it was something closer to relief. Industry insiders at the time estimated the band's touring revenue dropped by more than half in the years immediately following Taylor's departure, a number cold enough that the eventual reunion had less to do with brotherhood than with a balance sheet nobody could keep ignoring. Number 7. The Spinners, the Rubberband Man. Detroit, a funk stage past midnight, a horn section vamping under a spotlight that keeps landing on an empty microphone stand. Philippe Wynne joined the Spinners and did something almost impossible. He took a group that already had hits and made them sound reborn, turning songs like the Rubberband Man into extended, gospel-drenched sermons that stretched 3-minute singles into 5-minute spiritual experiences. Audiences didn't just listen to Win, they surrendered to him.
Rubberband Man, you never
But Win wanted more room to improvise than a tightly structured vocal group could offer. And in the late 70s, he left to join George Clinton's sprawling funk collective. Chasing a creative freedom the Spinners' format simply couldn't provide. The group replaced him and kept working, but the specific alchemy, that raw, unpredictable, church revival heat Win brought to every performance, never fully returned. Here's where tonight's story turns different from most of the ones on this list. The Spinners wanted him back. By most accounts, quiet overtures were made over the years that followed, doors left open, old bandmates hoping the itch to improvise would eventually run its course and bring him home. It never happened cleanly. Win kept moving from project to project until his life ended suddenly on stage in 1984, mid-performance, doing the very thing he'd left the group to keep doing freely. The reconciliation the Spinners hoped for never got its full, public moment, just an absence that calcified into permanence. Musicians who worked alongside Win in his final years have said he spoke about the Spinners with genuine warmth right up until the end, meaning the reunion both sides may have quietly wanted simply ran out of time before it ran out of pride. Number 6. DeBarge, All This Love. A rented studio in the 80s, family photographs taped crooked to a mixing console, a mother's voice somewhere off camera saying a name like a prayer. DeBarge wasn't just a group, it was a family. 5 siblings built into a single act by a label, desperate to manufacture the next Jackson dynasty. And at the center of all this love stood DeBarge, a falsetto so pure and aching it made the whole enterprise feel less like a marketing plan and more like an act of God. Fame didn't just complicate the family, it fractured it. Addiction moved through the group like a second, uninvited member, and by the mid-80s, the very voice the label had built its bets around, walked away for a solo career the label all but demanded, splitting a family that had never learned how to be anything but a group. What followed was decades of attempted reconciliation that kept collapsing under the weight of the same forces that broke it in the first place. Reunion tours were announced with real hope, real tears at press conferences, real belief that this time would be different. And more than once those tours fell apart before they finished, canceled dates piling up like apologies nobody quite knew how to finish saying.
So I gave it half a chance.
The DeBarge story isn't a clean redemption arc. It's a family that has spent 30 years trying to walk back into the same room together, only to find the door keeps swinging shut before everyone's inside. More than one reunion attempt was cut short not by creative differences, but by relapse. A reminder that for this particular family, the hardest addiction to overcome may not have been the drugs at all, but the fame that made the drugs feel necessary in the first place. Number 5. Switch, I Call Your Name.
I call your name, girl.
Los Angeles, a hospital waiting room in the 90s, fluorescent lights humming over a family too exhausted to speak. Switch gave the world some of the smoothest, most technically dazzling funk soul of the early 80s, and much of that brilliance, including the falsetto lead on I Call Your Name, ran through Bobby DeBarge, the eldest of the DeBarge brothers, whose voice and songwriting instincts helped define the group's sound before his younger sibling ever became a star in his own right. But addiction had already taken root, and as it deepened, Bobby's reliability collapsed along with it. Missed sessions, missed shows. A funk band built on tight, precise arrangements can only absorb so much unpredictability before the business side steps in and makes a decision the music side doesn't want to make. He was pushed out. For a while, the group tried to move forward, but something about Switch without Bobby felt incomplete in a way audiences couldn't quite articulate. Proof, again, that some voices aren't replaceable, only substituted for. By the time the band reached back out, hoping to bring him home for one more chapter, the years of addiction had already done damage no reunion could undo. He returned briefly, diminished but still gifted, before his health failed entirely, and he died in the mid-90s. The comeback the band had hoped would restore something arrived just in time to say goodbye, not just in time to rebuild. Bobby DeBarge's contributions to Switch's biggest records went largely uncredited in mainstream retrospectives for years, meaning the very voice that gave the group its early identity nearly vanished from its own history before he ever got the chance to reclaim it. Number 4. The Time. Jungle Love. Minneapolis. An empty soundstage after a movie shoot wraps. A leather jacket still draped over a chair nobody's claimed yet. The Time were engineered to be dangerous. Sharp suits, sharper grooves, and Jungle Love as the calling card of a frontman in Morris Day, whose swagger felt less like a performance and more like a threat. Behind the curtain, Prince controlled nearly every note the band played, using them as a proving ground for songs and sounds he'd later fold into his own legend. It was a brilliant arrangement for exactly as long as everyone agreed to pretend the band was really in charge of itself. Morris Day was the face the audience fell in love with, but he was never fully the architect of his own group's sound. And when Hollywood came calling with a film role that pulled him away from the band mid-stride, the fragile ecosystem Prince had built simply stopped working. Members scattered into session work, side projects, other configurations of the same musicians wearing different names. For years, The Time existed more as a rumor than a band, a name occasionally revived, a lineup occasionally reassembled, always shadowed by legal questions over who actually owned the right to call themselves that in the first place. Reunions happened in fits and starts throughout the following decades, hampered as much by ownership disputes as by any lingering resentment. When Morris Day and the surviving members finally found their way back to something resembling the original lineup, it wasn't framed as nostalgia. It was framed as reclamation. A group finally wresting their own name and legacy back from the shadow of the man who built them to serve someone else's vision. For a stretch of years, legal disputes over the band's name became so contentious that Morris Day was performing under an entirely different band name just to avoid the very phrase that made him famous. Number 3. The Temptations. My Girl. Detroit, a rehearsal hall, 1968. A door slamming somewhere down the hallway, and 5 men left standing in a room that suddenly feels too big. The Temptations didn't just fire David Ruffin, they fired the voice behind My Girl, a song that doesn't exist as the world knows it without that specific, aching rasp. But Ruffin's behavior on the road had spiraled, missed shows, mounting drug use, and a growing insistence that the group should simply be renamed after him, as if the other 4 men standing beside him were interchangeable. They weren't willing to become his backup band, so they let him go, and did something almost nobody expected. They got better without him. The Temptations that emerged in Ruffin's absence pushed into darker, more socially conscious psychedelic soul, scoring some of the biggest hits of their career and proving, painfully, that the group could survive, even thrive, without the man they'd once built entire arrangements around. That success didn't heal anything. If anything, it deepened the wound on both sides. Ruffin watching his old group top the charts without him, the group watching Ruffin's solo career struggle to match what he'd had inside their formation. Years of separate frustration eventually softened into something resembling forgiveness, and in the early 80s, Ruffin rejoined for a reunion tour and album, standing again beside the men he'd once dismissed as replaceable. It didn't last. Old tensions resurfaced almost immediately, and Ruffin left again within the year. He would die less than a decade later, his reconciliation with the group forever frozen at partial, close enough to remember what it once was, never quite whole enough to call it healed. David Ruffin died in 1991 after being found with severe injuries near a crack house in Philadelphia, and reports from the time noted that thousands of dollars he'd been carrying were never recovered. A devastatingly literal final verse to a man who once sang, more convincingly than almost anyone alive, about love, loss, and things taken that can never be given back. Number 2. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. If you don't know me by now. Philadelphia, a soundstage in the early 70s. A drummer steps out from behind his kit toward a microphone he was never supposed to touch. Harold Melvin had been grinding through doo-wop and soul for nearly 2 decades in Philadelphia without a real breakthrough when, in 1970, his lead singer quit. Looking around for a replacement, Melvin noticed something in his own drummer, a low, gravel and honey voice that could make heartbreak sound survivable. He moved that drummer to the front of the stage. His name was Teddy Pendergrass. Within 2 years, the group signed to Philadelphia International, the beating heart of early 70s soul, and the hits arrived one after another, all carried by that same extraordinary voice, including If You Don't Know Me By Now, the ballad that would define the group forever. Fans would compliment Teddy after shows by thanking Harold, never realizing Harold Melvin hadn't sung lead on a single one of his own group's biggest records. The name on the door and the voice in the room belonged to 2 different men, and almost nobody in the crowd knew it. By the mid-70s, the imbalance had become impossible to ignore, even for Melvin. But the billing, the money, and the recognition Pendergrass had earned never fully followed, and in 1975, he walked. His solo run became one of the greatest in the genre's history. 5 consecutive platinum albums, arenas full of fans who knew exactly whose voice they'd come to hear. Harold Melvin tried to continue with replacement singers, and for a moment it worked. Then it didn't. By the mid-80s, the group that once defined an entire label's sound was playing smaller rooms for smaller crowds, chasing an echo. Unlike almost every other story on tonight's list, this one never got its reunion. In March of 1982, at the exact peak of his solo career, a car crash on a Philadelphia road left Pendergrass paralyzed from the chest, down at 31 years old. He rebuilt a career from a wheelchair with astonishing courage. But the door back to Harold Melvin's stage, if it was ever really open, stayed shut. Melvin suffered a stroke in 1996 that left him unable to speak, and died the following year at 57. Pendergrass died in 2010 at 59. The two men who built one of soul music's most enduring catalogs together spent the back half of their lives never sharing a stage again. For years after Pendergrass left, Harold Melvin's group kept touring under his name with a rotating cast of replacement lead singers, meaning audiences across the country paid to hear Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes from a man who, for the songs that mattered most, had never actually sung a note of them.
Just get yourself together.
Number 1, New Edition, Candy Girl. Boston, a basement rec room. 5 teenagers harmonizing off-key into a microphone none of them can really afford. The sound that would become Candy Girl, and the thing that hasn't happened yet, but is about to. New Edition began as 5 kids from Boston's Orchard Park housing projects who turned a local talent show fluke into a phenomenon under producer Maurice Starr, who saw in them something that reminded him of a young Jackson 5. By 1983, Candy Girl had hit number 1 on the R&B chart, followed quickly by more hits. But even in those early days, Bobby Brown was the wild card, the one who moved differently, pushed against the choreography, and brought something unpredictable to a group built on precision.
So fancy, looks so sweet, she makes my heart just skip.
That same unpredictability made him a liability. Missed flights, growing friction with the group's more business-minded members, and a squeaky clean teen idol image that never fit who he actually was. It all built toward a breaking point. In December of 1985, under pressure from the label, the other members held a vote. It wasn't the industry that pushed Bobby out the door. It was the friends he'd grown up with from the same projects, the same block, the same story, voting him out of the group they'd built together. And then something almost unheard of in this business happened. Both halves of the split became massive successes at once. New Edition, reshaped, became polished, radio-dominating stars in their own right. Bobby Brown, cut loose, became one of the defining solo voices in the genre, releasing an album stacked with hit singles and a Grammy-winning single that reinvented what R&B could sound like. In one of the strangest ironies in music history, New Edition themselves opened for Bobby Brown's tour a few years later, the group that voted him out, selling tickets to watch him headline without them. Underneath the rivalry sat something the charts couldn't measure. These were kids who'd shared bunk beds and empty pockets before any of them had a dollar to their name. That bond didn't dissolve with a vote. In 1996, all 6 members, Bobby included, reunited for the first time since the split, and the album they released debuted at #1 and sold 4 million copies worldwide. It should have been the ending everyone wanted. Instead, tensions boiled over into a physical altercation on stage between Bobby and Michael Bivins. The tour collapsed mid-run, and the full six-man lineup has never fully held together since. One of the group's own members put the truth plainly around that time. Having New Edition back together didn't mean creative peace or their best work. It meant they could take care of their families. Not triumph, survival.
Well, Jack got Ricky and Rob.
Michael Bivins himself later admitted that voting Bobby out was the decision that let the rest of the group finally break free creatively. Meaning even the men who removed him eventually confessed, out loud, that the thing they voted away was the most explosive piece they ever had. 10 stories. 10 bands who thought the music could survive without the voice that made it matter. Some who got the reunion, and some, like Harold Melvin's group, who spent the rest of their lives just missing him. Every one of these stories is really the same letter, written years late, mailed to a version of the band that no longer exists, hoping someone's still there to receive it. Tell us in the comments which one broke you the most. Subscribe. Because we are not done uncovering the voices the industry tried to erase. There are more names, more silences, more men and women still waiting for their door to open. The music never lies, even when the industry does.